Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rezzed Developer Sessions. Hello also to the people watching online. I always look up like they're up there, but they're not. My name is Bertie. I'm a writer for Eurogamer. A quick note before we start, there will be time for questions at the end, so have a think while you're watching the session. There'll be a microphone. There's a nice green cross on the floor. That's where you can ask your questions from. But without further ado, from all the way in Wrocław in Poland, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Konrad Czernik, the senior concept artist on Dying Light 2.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Actually, I'm very proud to be here. It's my first presentation in England and United Kingdom, and I'm very proud to introduce you this subject. We have pretty big content, so I'll try to rush up a little bit in the beginning with the, just to get to dark ages. That is the main promise of this talk. And actually, during this talk, you will see many examples of our history designs and our games. And I'll recommend you to write down the questions just to have the time for a very thick Q&A session in the end. So the subject is character building from the Wild West to modern dark ages, because our games were coming from different genres, and actually this is some of Techland's games we were doing. We started, my history began with Call of Juarez, which is Western games. I love them the most. My favorite game was Bound in Blood, and I'm very proud of this. People like also Call of Juarez Gunslinger because it was a very comic book approach, and the narration was fun and everything like that. Then we skipped to and switched to zombie games, which were slasher. And then, of course, you recognize Dying Light, which was the biggest subject that we were working on. And also, we did many different games for mobiles and more cartoony style, which was fun for me. And also, we did a pre-production of Hellraid that I was very proud of, and also Warhound, which you guys can actually forget about, but there was kind of pre-production of that game. But the things we learned from Warhound, we put to Bound in Blood, so that's why it was so a good game. The subject we are focused on will be characters for Dying Light 2, but going through different examples from our previous games. And we realized that we want to make something with the zombies, but actually adding some narration, deepness and mature approach to the world. And we didn't want to make history once again as a flat world with just killing zombies. So we've added this idea of getting back to the medieval times, because whenever you're in post-apocalyptic world, you're getting back to the values from medieval times, when there is no electricity, there are sickness, people are bad to each other and everything like that. So first of all, I'm an artist, so my main experience was realizing that I'm not an artist as a personality itself. It's just always with a group of crazy creative people, as those on the example here. And I've realized that I have to put my ego to the pocket immediately, because the team is the most important thing. I get a lot of feedback from people, from level design, from narration, game design, sound effects. And this is just a part of the list of people that we have to cooperate with. And my favorite ones are the sound effects artists and Q&A and level designers, because they give me feedback. Do the characters and environment is readable, understandable, attractive, and do they have fun of the things we actually design? And we cooperate a lot. The sound effects artists are asking me how the characters sound like, how the environment sounds like, and how was the main feeling. That leads us to art guide. Every game has an art guide or style guide. Different companies call it different names. But it also links to emotions that we want to bring in players' experience through different execution. We can't show you our art guides, but this is the things we are focusing on while doing our own art guides. But the emotions are the most important things. Also, we link to the culture and iconography and history of the Western world, because we are raised in that, so we have to name it and answer those challenges very accurate. So pipeline is depending of the characters. It depends of the system, the individual or the hero. The ones we're focused on on the guys today will be individual characters. And I don't know, do you see it brightly, but the first 3 stages are the stages that concept artist doesn't have to impact on, but another those 6 are the stages that concept artist is working with every team, which is story, art, 3D models, which is also sculpting, high and low poly. We have to give feedback and receive new information, what's possible in the game, what's not possible 2D, so textures, rigging, and animation, and then putting in the game in programming. So design, I divided on 2 approaches, narrative and visual. It depends on the people and the challenge. Sometimes we use narrative approach, which was based on Call of Juarez 4 and Billy the Kid, who shows you that he killed many sheriffs. You can see that on the stars on his chest, allegory of the death through the rope on his neck, the red accents that he's not covering himself in the environment, too many weapons, ammo, and everything like that. So it's narration approach. Wojtek Ostrycharz was doing this design, and he led this team into beautiful game, narration way. Also, I did few designs for Call of Juarez 3, Dead Island, and Bound in Blood. And also we did that in every other game, after South Inclined 1, for instance, too. Second approach is visual, which is building the shapes which are visible from the distance. We are focusing on this approach while doing enemies especially. So on the same model, you can add little things and just tell different stories through the shape. And that's so easy, and I recommend to do this as soon as possible, because it takes less few minutes and the impression is totally different. And this approach was executed in Dead Island, Dying Light also. Whenever you have to play with different characters in the dark, in the distance, you recognize them from 30, 50 meters, and that's a very good feature for us artists. Context, which is very important to make everything consistent, world, characters, and the story. We take a lot of inspiration from movies and TV series. I love TV series more because the arc of the character is more complicated. You can make more interesting twists, and the time is more comfortable. And actually, what's beautiful in recent years is that we're mixing good and bad features, traits in characters. In 1938, whenever the first Superman appeared in the comic book shops, it was just plain good characters, symmetrical, bright colors, beautiful. And then you can observe how they were changing to a bit more into darkness. And the thing we've noticed is a difference between 1960 Westerns and 1980s was using these traits of evil and asymmetry, coarse, and narration was very wasn't that obvious as previously in the production, in the history of the movies, so we like the second approach more. And actually, since Call of Juarez 2, Bound in Blood, we stick to that a lot, so we want to break our characters until now. So making consistency of environment and the characters is very important, but also keeping them as an accent in the environment. So everything you can see here is very consistent, yet very readable. Everything is crooked according to the environment. The boards on the walls, the arrangement of the objects is very irregular. Geometry is very complex, yet the color palette is preserved for environments and also for characters. The elements that you can see around the hips are very decorative, just as the bottom of the buildings and everything you approach very closely to in this game, which is shooter. In shooter game, you approach cover system very close, so it has to be interesting from a distance, medium distance, and very close distance. So final concept art has to have references, design, color, script, and everything like that. Okay, but how? So first thing we usually ask is the brief. Whenever we can, we are asking for narration brief, but very often story appears quite late during the production, so we usually ask for gameplay features, which are telling us how the player would how the character will affect player in the scene. So usually it's easier to name, especially if it comes to enemies. And it depends of the approach that your team, our team, have at the stage of the production. Usually we start with the gameplay because our games were gameplay-driven until now. Right now we're switching to narration-driven more. And second stage is making research, which is Googling images. Whenever I have to design Barbarian, I check what pop culture understands through the Barbarian and gather all the data that I can just to understand what you guys, we do understand through this archetype. Third stage is references, which is more scientific approach, then understanding the architecture, fabrics, history, designs, and everything like that. So we have to make this homework just to be adult and mature and very well designed. I mean, designing things on the highest level. Just to reach icons or archetypes. So whenever you see those images, you don't have doubts that elf is on the left, barbarian is on the right. So it can be readable through the geometry of the objects, that the right side is using medium size of the objects and very heavy elements visually and narratively, so using the different materials. And the left side is using big surfaces divided on small details. So whenever I would have challenge to design 4 gameplay types of the player, let's say based on Diablo archetypes, Barbarian would be on the left side, Rogue would be on the left, on the right there will be Barbarian, on the left would be Rogue, let's say second would be Mage, and the third would be Warrior Paladin. If it's not readable on the left side, that on the right side it should be readable also. And that's what we were using also in our mobile games, especially if you have small device, as we were designing games for, like iPhone 3, I think. Then pixel is quite small, so we have to send those images immediately on the device just to see our objects smaller than 1 pixel, and that's what we do in our AA games in 3D also, just to prototype spaces, prototype characters, drop them in the environment just to see are they readable from a distance, and do we understand who do we play with, and is the detail bigger than 1 pixel, let's say from a 20 meters distance. Because if you decorate a character with interesting small details and you put him or her 20 meters away from you, you don't see those details and LOD objects are disappearing. So I totally recommend you to do that. And brainstorming stage is the very quick in failing and also quick in naming needs. So I totally recommend to make rough sketches even during the meeting and talks just after you receive the brief. just to understand what's the visual exploration, what shapes character would reach the idea behind the brief. Funny story behind this is whenever we were judging our designs by is it nice or not, is it spectacular or badass or something like that, we didn't reach our goals that easy. As whenever we're judging our designs through the emotional impact on the player. So behind that, there is a story of the zombie from the Thailand. I was asked to design one zombie which is just regular biter. And I was very happy of doing first concept for that island. And also adding a lot of blood on him, yeah. So I was very happy of these results, but still getting feedback of adding some guts and broken ribs and everything like that. So after a few hours and days and weeks, he looked like that. So it looked like meat, which is not readable from a distance. And if you have crowd of that kind of designs, you just see red crowd. So you don't recognize enemies. And I was asking, why do I have to add those elements on the top? So my boss told me finally that he wants to make him disgusting. So I was living in dorm, and I know how rotting meat looks like, and was the color script. I will save you from looking at this beautiful image. Yet I understood that connection of pink, red, and green, and yellow is the thing that stands behind the disgust impression. So we've switched from this micromanagement directive feedbacking of each other to measuring our criteria by emotions. So we kept both approaches, narrative and shapes, during the production of Dying Light and also other games back then. And the final concept art is always with a panel of references, which is showing specific materials and everything that shows 3D modeler, animators, and everyone who is working on the model later on what's the specific character of the design. So we use a lot of references around design itself. So that's what led us to our Dying Light 2 approach, which is very mature, and we're very proud of the approach that we have right now. And we realized that we want to add to our game, post-apocalyptic game, this modern dark ages idea. So we've kept our environment very narrative, interesting according to the shapes. Finally found the diverse color palette and everything like that. And you can see the story behind this project in the trailers. And according to the characters, we've divided characters for factions with the different ideas for them. So, for instance, we'll see peacekeepers here, which are ex-military and police formation. My idea, because I had pleasure to be in pre-production of these characters as a character art director, so we've realized that the square would be the visual language behind this faction, because it's coarse, it's regular, it's perpendicular, heavy, and telling about less agile approach to the world that we need in our parkour featured player. Later on, exploring the square on the different kind of armors was still consistent with the approach to the narration and visual diversity. And also this medieval flavor was shown by linking to the knight archetype. So Rafał Rybak, who was designing this faction, was challenged to design something that is not cliche, not cheesy, but yet still understandable. What kind of materials, what kind of techniques is accessible in post-apocalyptic world that we wanted to do. And this archetype of the knight is not only visual, but also narrative. And you can see that they are not too skilled in crafting. The design that they have is quite coarse and heavy. So that was linking also to this perpendicular and parallel lines of the heraldry that we use in our game. And it still has to be very simple and telling the story behind those characters also. So every faction has a scene in our game, a scene that leads us all to the falling of the world. And according to this faction, the scene is being rigid, short-sighted, narrow vision. So through what we could show that is that the visors of the helmets is also linking to the medieval times, but also showing that they are not too agile and open-minded, and that's what leads them to fall. Old rules doesn't pay off in this world, which is very agile, and that's what we wanted to achieve through those designs. This is done by Kasia Hankiewicz and Lorenzo Tossi, I think. And this is the final designs what we have in our game, so we can actually read that and also recognize them narrative and visual way. And the thing we realized is that the modular system is very good thing to make a variety of these 3D objects. Also characters, because if we have to make a very wide society, then we have to be smart in designs. So we cut our models in those places, but also different factions has cuts in different places. So what I totally recommend you to do whenever you are developing your own game or project, I totally recommend you to be smart and think about spaces that you can cut and change elements just to make a bigger number of examples. Also making different textures, which are quite cheap in our times. Previous, like 15 years ago, 20, we have to count even the textures. Right now we have a quite big memory of devices that we're making games for. So it's so much easier, and I'm very happy of the things we can do right now. So diversity of the objects is very important, and what we've realized is that head changes impression even 50%, because it's related to probably some prehistorical hunting and being in society for so many years. People doesn't pay attention to the legs that much, so we have smaller number of models for legs also. So that led us to a current approach of design, and you can see those characters in the environment. Peacekeepers are quite original because of the color script. They're using green and blue, which is archetypical colors for factions of police and military services. Society is destroyed, describing that the world is falling. And each faction will be very readable from a distance, but also interesting from a close distance during the dialogues or close combat. So that was a big challenge, and we actually are very proud of the effects that we achieved. And consistency of the world is also quite big challenge whenever you work in big company like we have, quite numerous employees, which is over 300, and you have to connect environment team with the characters team, and it has to all work together. So this is what we actually achieved. And another thing, and the last one, is designing characters for day and night. So everyone likes to design the characters which are dark and black because they are evil and interesting, especially with the spikes. But the thing was challenge for us was also designing characters for a night, and we have to keep some bright areas on the surfaces. So on this screen from the Dying Light, the following, you can see how readable is the character, which is divided on the bright and dark sections. So that's how we usually try to design our enemies, NPCs, and heroes. So if we come to a conclusion and taking concept art, which is my main occupation during the production, concept is like 70% and art is just 30. I don't know how many of you are doing your art, but if you are confused by effects that you have or not spectacular images, I totally recommend you to draw and think, and art is just 30%. If there's a good idea, your designs will be fine. There are people who can polish your arts and make it more spectacular, but if there is an idea and narrative maturity behind that, design will be great. So that will be all, and thank you. You have other questions that I can't answer here, please email this email, and also my friend Ola will help me with the Q&A section, so if there is questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Thank you. Bye.
Come up and just stand here at the same time. So come on, don't be shy, come and ask some questions. Konrad, thank you very much for getting through all of that so quickly as well.
Yeah, that was quick.
I don't know how you did it, but one thing that I find, or a few things that I find fascinating, one thing particularly is this idea that we're going back to the medieval times or back to the Dark Ages. I suppose visually, compared to Dying Light 1, how obvious is that going to be? What visual things will we see? I mean, we saw some of the armor designs there, but what other things are we going to see that are going to remind us that this is actually the Dark Ages?
A lot, every level actually, because even the values of the world, the things you trade by, and the weapons. The weapons.
Okay, so what kind of? So when you say medieval times, I'm thinking a giant claymore and things like that. Is this what we're?
Actually, we're not.
Not really.
What can I say?
Oh, go on, you can tell us.
You will use melee weapons for sure, because this is how we fight. But this is archetype. Everything that I've said about the characters is the same path is on the weapons. So archetypical things you dream of, you'll meet them, but maybe not the direct approach as you could actually think of claymore. So what would in this world will be the claymore, yeah? So that would be the proper approach.
You'll also have basically weapons that are melee weapons, Middle Ages style melee weapons made from modern materials, as in, signs, road signs, and other stuff.
And do we get a chance to modify these weapons?
Yes. As in weapon crafting, yes.
What about horses?
Where did that come from?
Can we ride? Well, it's medieval times, they all...
well, actually, I can get back to you on that.
Okay. So another thing that I thought of, when you were showing us the designs of the gruesome monsters and, your dorm rooms and all the rotten meat and stuff that you saw, but you were saying you go through Google, and I'm sure you've been through some of the darker sides of Google looking at things.
Many times.
Does it ever strike you as a little bit weird when you're researching zombies and mutant monsters and things like that? Do you ever pinch yourself and think, this is a bit weird, all this stuff that's going into my head?
Yeah, you meet many different things, especially people throw different things on the internet, but if there is some criteria, is it disgusting, or is it interesting, or is it awkward? This is the criteria we usually put, and even if we can't copy something from the reference, we take impression from the reference and try to put that. But also internet is beautiful because it represents crooked, quirky minds of 21st century people. Yeah, so it's actually fine.
Yeah, the search history is probably not great at Techland.
We like to be a bit provocative, but still not putting fingers in people's eyes, just to not be too flat, too obvious,
What's the What's the most disgusting thing you've drawn or created?
Eyes. The thing, but this is my thing. Whenever there is something wrong with the eye, people usually get attraction to that, and you immediately see that there is something wrong with that. So we use that very often also.
Oh, I'll keep an eye out for it. So of all the things, you mentioned, all the many kind of settings that Techland has been through, Wild West and now sort of modern medieval times. Is there a favourite of yours, one that you've really enjoyed more than the others?
Me personally, or we as a company?
Well, you personally.
Me personally, I've mentioned before, it's Call of Juarez, it's Western, but I love gore designs, and that's why I'm not so long, because I'm working there for 12 years now. But I know there are many different people in our company, so it's actually good to have different approaches. And we like horror games also. What do you like?
Yes, same, I guess. That's why I work there.
Which is your favourite Western film?
There are so many of them, but classic, I would say, Good, Bad, and Ugly, I would say. But from the modern ones, Gran Torino, Clint Eastwood, is still Western for me, because it's single person in front of the hard environment and weird society, and that's romantic history.
Not Wild Wild West with Will Smith.
I respect this movie, but no.
I guess please come up and ask your questions.
Yeah,
but it's just me waffling on. I suppose as something as a senior artist and people playing Dying Light 2 at some point in the future, what do you hope that people see when they're playing the game? What would you encourage people to look out for?
Yes, we have actually a very bright idea what is the meaning behind the game, which is being responsible for your actions, and the features we're focusing on is choices and consequences, which is whenever you do something, it puts impact on different section of the world, and that's how it works in our game, in our world. So that's.
So, sorry, a question on that. Because I've heard about this choice and consequence before,
yeah.
How visually different can an area be?
Very.
Okay.
Entirely.
Very different. Yeah. So you'll see that on many levels. Actions of society, visually designed rooftops and bottoms of the city, how people affect the environment, and how what you can take from the world whenever you put impact on yourself. I mean, invest only on yourself. Yeah.
Fantastic. And we have a question.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Christian, and I'm a BCT student, and I'm doing a game designer course. And in our course, we moduled a character for our grade. And I was going to ask you, is it for the character design, do you think it's better to have low police or high police? We have to make a small, our brief is we have to make a small room, 4 rooms maximum, and 2 characters. So what do you recommend for the character design? How should I model it? With less police or put more police on the character?
So it's technical question, is it?
Yeah, technical.
Okay, so it depends of the memory of the device that you're designing the game. I don't want to, because it's the lower poly the better, because then you can add some affixes, environment assets and everything like that if you save this memory for the environment. But usually we do, according to the pipeline, we do high poly, even scanning. It has millions of polygons, even the face has millions of polygons, then making retopology and rigging and animation. So we usually try to keep our characters very cheap, according to the geometry.
Also, you know how in your characters you modeled, they have bugs and stuff on them?
Yeah.
Are they part of the character, or are the different polygons, different models put on top of the character?
Depending, are they animated or not? Can you take them off or not?
Oh, okay. And also I had one technical question about the game, about are we still gonna be allowed to do the drop kick? Like that, like
Good
Dying Light
question.
1.
So falling down from the roof and
Yeah, jump kicking them like Dying Light
of course,
1.
if we keep
Okay.
we keep that and many other features. So
This is still Dying Light.
it's not
Okay.
revolution, it's evolution of Dying Light. So you'll be happy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
Drop
so
kicks
much.
confirmed. All right, thank you very much, Konrad. Thank you very much for you guys for coming. Oh, have we got time for?
Yeah, that was just a quick one. When you mentioned, obviously, there's a big thing with the effect of the player can have on the world.
Mhm.
But you never really mentioned the effect that the player can have on the character design, which is obviously what you do.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been mentioned here, and I haven't seen it mentioned anywhere else. But
Yeah.
say if you're against the peacekeepers and you're just doing everything you can to destroy them, will they visually look different? Will they have less armor, dirty? Will they look weak, or will that change in the way of their character?
According to the to which feature?
Do you mean kind of the strength of the faction?
Yeah,
if you're,
yeah.
So
Say
if you're
you're anti-peacekeeper and you're literally doing everything you can to ruin the peacekeepers.
can you kind of make the faction weaker, and will you visually see the faction?
So not
get
just visually in the world, but will the actual characters look different? Will they have less armor, or will they look more pale or ill?
Not even yes, and also they will act differently.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we know. That I mean, that's what we actually see. Yeah, so you are putting very readable impact on the world.
So did you have to design different concepts for, say, if the peacekeepers are their strongest? and their
You
weakest?
saw that there are incomplete and there are complete. So you'll meet different designs according to the path that you've chosen. Also, what's the condition of the faction?
Okay, cool. Oh, yeah, I think that's answered very well. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Oh, we got a person. Oh, it's coming back. I feel like
Yeah.
we're directly responsible for your education now.
Yeah.
One final question, quick.
Okay, I was gonna ask you, because in Dying Light 1 you had the multiplayer where you had the Dark Knights, where you had the zombie and the players. Are we gonna have a reboot of that? Are we gonna have like different models for the zombie, or is it gonna be the same?
I'm sorry, we will have different, I mean, we'll have different zombies in Dying Light 2.
Yeah, but I mean like in multiplayer, because in Dying Light 1 there was the version where...
Are you referring to the Be the Zombie?
Yeah, be the zombie
Oh.
and attack other players.
Okay, gotcha. We will have more to reveal about that. So,
Is it
okay.
gonna be in the game though? Because that's my favorite mod. Like, being the zombie and just go kill other people.
We know that this is popular. We know that Be the Zombie
Yeah.
is still very popular, and we are looking at it. I just can't confirm it just yet. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Top marks for trying that. Okay, we have to wrap up. Sorry, we have to wrap up. We don't have any more time.
Actually, when you have questions, please ask ask questions.
I'll get that email.
Yeah. So Ola,
I'll ask him. I promise.
You've met Ola.
Okay, thank you once again, Konrad. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. Up next, we have Universal Space Station, which is a new game. So come along and see that, learn about a new game. But yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you so much.